Hello, we are at Chapel Down Vineyards today in Tenterden in the beautiful Kent countryside. It's a great place to come and visit. There's tours, there's tastings, there's a great shop. Let's take a look inside.
We've just opened our new tasting room, which is fantastic, so we can now welcome larger groups of people to sit down in an atmosphere much more befitting of the wine. We've just refurbished the shop with a new tasting room there as well. So it's important to be a destination. We've got a lovely restaurant up there, so people can come, walk around the vineyards. You know, there's a self-guided tour around the vineyards. They can do a guided tour around the winery with one of our tour guides. They can taste wines in the shop, go for lunch up in the Swan.
Yeah.
That's a nice day out.
Yeah.
That's an event in itself.
Yeah.
I think we should sort of go back in time, because maybe you already know, but it was the Romans who introduced the vineyards to Britain 2,000 years ago, because obviously the Romans loved their wine. So wherever the Romans went, so did the vineyards. Obviously the fall of the Roman Empire, they went back home, the skills declined. But where we are, this area here, this is called Small Hythe, Tenterden. And this actual estate, in fact, it was a working farm back in the 1970s. It was owned by a guy called, you may have heard of Steve Skelton. He's an MW, Master of Wine. And back in the 1970s, when it was a mixed farm, he owned it, and he decided to rip out all the land and plant vines. So he was very forward thinking.
So we make still wine and sparkling wine, roughly half of each at the moment. And our style, all of our wines are linked by a kind of a thread of freshness. That's easy to achieve with an English climate, but we like to bring fresh, fruit-forward flavours to our wines. To make them approachable, not dumbing them down in any way, but to make them approachable and easy to understand, really. In our Brut, for example, our Brut non-vintage, we use Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, but we also use Pinot Blanc, which sets it apart slightly from some of the other producers. And that Pinot Blanc brings a slightly floral note to the wine in its youth that develops into more of a honeyed character as it ages. In comparison to Champagne, it's very easy to make comparisons. We grow very similar grape varieties, we make wine in a similar method, a very similar cool climate, but also to note of the differences. Our climate during the growing season is about 1 degree cooler than in Champagne, but we have a more maritime climate, less continental. This means a warmer spring and a warmer autumn and a cooler summer. So our growing season is elongated, which means that our grapes have a longer time to develop those flavours, which are key, obviously, and also the acid tends to fall away slower than it would in a warmer climate. So our wines will always retain that kind of characteristic freshness, which makes them so appealing.
The first thing that struck us at Chapel Down was that it's a really nice place to visit and very well catered for visitors, but it becomes apparent pretty swiftly that this is really a tale of ambition. You go into the shop and you can't help but be impressed at the breadth of the range of what they do, and from talking to Josh and the rest of the team there, again, you can't fail but to be impressed at the sheer ambition of trying to build a significant breadth of sparkling wines, still wines, many other things, right up to some very, very premium wines. So let's hear a bit more about that.
We need to be pushing at the top end. We need to be doing wines which haven't been done before, because we are not a new producer from an existing region. You know, we're a new region. This is a viticultural region being born, and that only happens once.
Yeah.
And so we need to do our part to push the styles, to see how far the wines can go, to see how good they can be, because we don't have centuries of tradition to fall back on, and nor to constrain us in what we do. We need to innovate, we need to experiment, and we need to push. And that's where, you know, the wines like Orange Bacchus, Albarino, the Kitts Coty wines, that's where they all come in. And we need to make those small volume niche wines, because it keeps us interested, it keeps our consumers interested, and also we can learn lessons on those. I think it's about value for money, for me, rather than overall price. Our Brut non-vintage sits just above supermarket own label Champagne, but well below the Grand mark. Yeah, at £25, it's £10 below Veuve Clicquot or Moet, which is great, and it does represent very good value for money at that price point. And I think customers realise that and accept it. Once people taste the wines, they realise the quality is there, and it's not about being better than champagne. It's about offering wines of equal quality at prices which represent good value for money.
The ambition that these guys have isn't limited just to wine, as well as the cider and beer you can see on this table. That extends to grappa, gin, vodka, a whole host of other things, where they're seeing just how far they can push what an English winemaker or English drinks producer can do.
We make beer, we make cider, we make gin and vodka, and they're important parts of the range now. The cider's made here on site, the brewery is under construction at the moment, the gin and the vodka, part of it's made here and then part elsewhere because of licensing restrictions. The idea that a product comes from their local area is hugely important for consumers, and particularly if they can visit us. I mean, you can see behind me here, it's a lovely place to come visit. We have 60,000 visitors per year, and they then make an emotional connection with the place, and that's when they really understand why a wine tastes like it does. When you've visited the vineyard, you can truly understand it, and I'd encourage anyone who hasn't to get out there and visit their local vineyard, taste the wines and try and understand that link between the terroir and the wine.
At the end of what was a very good and comprehensive tour, we decamped along with the rest of our party to the tasting room, which is easily able to handle parties of around 20 or so, where you get a very good range of Chapel Down wines to taste as part of your tour fee. So the first thing we tried, I'll just do some turbo reviews. The first thing we tried was their Bacchus, which was a very classic sort of Bacchus. These guys compare it to Sauvignon Blanc. I think that's a pretty fair comparison because it's got a bit of that grassy sort of notes to it, but also really came through with a sort of very English nettly sort of thing, which gave it a good sense of place. Second up on the white wines was the 2014 Chardonnay. Again, another still wine, which I was really impressed with. Immediately on the attack, it had a good sort of cool climate flintiness, reminding me of Chablis, but then towards the finish, you got that hint of creaminess that, if I can be geeky for a minute, comes through from the malolactic fermentation. It's unoaked, so it's very, very clean, but that continued to give it a really good Burgundian feel. And again, with some wine geekery, my thought at the time was, if anybody can take me in one glass of Chardonnay from Chablis down to Meursault, then somebody knows how to make wine. So I was very impressed with that. One of the best English still wines I've yet tasted. After that, we moved on to Still Red with a Pinot Noir Rondeau blend. Always very interesting when you're tasting in a big room because you can hear what other people are thinking about the wines. I'd have liked to have tasted the straight Pinot Noir as well. I didn't think that this wine, which his name is Union Red, I didn't feel it had particular Pinot Noir sort of characteristics. It had a bit more velvety, not velvet, violety sort of characteristics. It reminded me of a sort of nearer a Malbec, strangely, than a Pinot blend, but that could be the Rondeau grape, which I'm unfamiliar with. But that went down really well in the room. So that wine comes in at £13, the same sort of price point as the Bacchus. The Chardonnay a little bit more at £14.99. So none of these are cheap wines, but they're still within that sort of £10 to £15 sweet spot that we think is where people should be aiming. After that, it was time to get on to the fizz. So we drank 3 sparklers. Firstly was the classic non-vintage Brut, which again was extremely well received at £23.99. As Josh has already said, it comes in at a price point that's good for English sparkling wine. The way that champagne is now priced, that's kind of £10 below most people's sort of main non-vintage cuvée, so represents very, very solid value in that regard. I really liked it. It had good Englishy sort of characteristics, real sort of black fruit, berries, a very brambly, almost brackeny sort of characteristic that also came through in the next wine, which was the Century Extra Dry. for mass confusion in the way that wine things are described. The extra dry is a bit sweeter than the non-vintage brut. And actually the room of about 18 people was kind of split down the middle. That unsurprisingly, some people who find brut champagne a little bit too dry, they really, really liked that little bit more sweetness in the Century extra dry. I thought they were both very good wines. I thought they shared a real familial sense. Again, that brambly, brackeny sort of characteristic came through for me. And then the last wine that we tasted that comes in at £29.99, so still under £30, albeit not by much, but that's not expensive for very good fizz, was the Three Graces from 2013. And as I'd expect from a rung up the quality tier, you could really taste that in the wine. It was every embodiment of what I always talk about as you sort of move up the range, that everything's just turned up a bit. And again, that focus, you think it's focused beforehand, just a little turn, and then suddenly everything's sharper, everything's more precise. Still that freshness is there, still good acidity in there, still that red fruit characteristics coming in as well. And I thought that was a very lovely wine, and I'm very much looking forward to comparing the three sparklers that we tried there with this one, which is the Kit's Côté Blanc de Blanc. Kit's Côté being a bit chalkier. That's their sort of premium vineyard. So I'll be fascinated to find out what the Kit's Côté tastes like, because there was so much of that sort of red fruit and sort of bramble brackeny thing coming through with the normal Chapel Down fizz. So we'll try this one in a second, and through the magic of editing, I shall now reappear with 5 open bottles and some glasses, and we'll do some tasting. Welcome back from the magic of editing. I now have 5 open bottles and 5 glasses in front of me. I think we'll start with the lager, then the cider, then move on to the stills and then the fizz. Not quite sure why, but that makes sense to me. The lager here, Curious Brew, very much on trend. There's an awful lot of craft beer and craft cider and craft gin. We haven't got the gin or the vodka with us today because we're stupid. I'm nobody's beer expert, so I apologise for the rank amateurish of the review that will follow. But this says beer by winemakers. I do know at least a little bit about winemaking. A lager of purity and freshness, brewed using Saz and Cascade hops and fine English pale malt. Then for a cleaner, fruitier and more aromatic finish, re-fermented with champagne yeast and a dosage of rare Nelson Sauvin hops. Interesting. So is it a beer for wine lovers? Don't know why I'm sniffing it. Never sniffed a lager in my life, but hey, there you go. It's really interesting. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it kind of does what it says on the tin. It's very nice. I don't quite know what to expect. I drink a fair bit of lager when I'm not drinking wine. I don't consider myself to be an aficionado, but I'd say that with a lot of the craft pills and stuff like that that's out there, this can stand up to those. But it's very different. Has that kind of, does have a winey sort of feel to it. I don't know whether it's, again, my head playing tricks with me. But yeah, that's very nice, 4.7%. Doesn't really seem particularly alcoholic, wears that quite lightly. That's really very, very nice. So onto the cider. 100% grapes, we're winemakers, so no concentrates, no water, no bad fruit. A clean, fresh cider. Let's have a try. That is a clean, fresh cider. That's very pleasant. It's actually more than pleasant. That's actually very nice. I'd be more than happy if I had that on a nice summer's day. For something that isn't their day job. I think that's a very fine effort. I've tasted an awful lot worse, and probably not tasted an awful lot that's very much better than that. That's really clean. That's really precise. Sometimes cider can be a bit sharp. That isn't. Very, very gluggable. So yeah, well done. Okay, back on to home turf. So this one I'm excited about. It's the Chardonnay Albarino blend, coming in at $14.99. The first English producer to make Albarino, therefore it is my first English Albarino. Having been impressed by the Chardonnay as a still wine, I'm really keen to sample this one. Especially when, as regular viewers will know, we're big fans of Albarino at WinedUp. It's nice. Of that classic, it hasn't got those classic Albarino kind of whitey sort of fruits, peaches and so on. It's just got a tiny little kiss of it. More appley than anything else. So still white fruits is very nice. Be interested to know what the blend is between Chardonnay and Albarino, because I'm genuinely confused on that front. I think it's maybe a little bit more Albarino than Chardonnay, but that would be pure guesswork. Nice fruity nose, very, very clean, very, very flinty. Again, considering there's not a lot of commonality between northern Spain and the south of England, other than Galicia, which is Albarino's home, is rainy and very lush. But this is taking Albarino quite a few degrees of temperature away from where it should normally live, and they've done a very, very nice job. I really like it. I don't know if I would have picked it out as a Chardonnay Albarino blend from a lineup, but frankly, who cares, as long as it's good, and it is. So on to the Bacchus. So this is the first of the Kit's Coty wines that I've tried. The rest of the ones that we had were the mainstream Chapel Down. So it's going to be interesting. Much bigger on the nose. The Bacchus that we had at the tasting, which I've had a couple of times and several different vintages, was very, very forward. You know, very sharp on the attack. Let's have a little whirl of this. Ooh, hello. That's really opened up in the glass quite a lot, even in the last few minutes. That's really quite interesting. It's got a little hint of oak in there. There's a little bit of creaminess in there. It doesn't taste like Bacchus. I don't think that's a bad thing at all, especially when most people don't know what Bacchus tastes like. Weirdly, it's got more of the Albarino sort of characteristics, that kind of, you know, tropical fruit kind of vibe. If Mosel Riesling and Galician Albarino had a baby, I think it would taste an awful lot like that. Having fairly recently been in the Mosel myself, those yellow fruits sort of coming through there, very tropical, very, very lovely. This is Consult's Notes, £25, which again, you're at the top end of most people's white wine drinking budget, but that's really good. That really is nice, and it's opening up. I mean, there's a lot of depth in there. The finish gets longer with every mouthful. I'm definitely very, very, very much looking forward to finishing that one. That's a cracker. I think this is one of the first vintages of this wine that they've made, and I'd say they've absolutely nailed that. So well done to the team on that one. And lastly, we have the Kit's Coty Blanc de Blanc. So again, very curious to see what this tastes like, because the other fizzes from the more southern vineyards had that very brackly, brambly kind of vibe. So what will this one taste like? I'm not expecting it to have any of those red fruit characteristics. So let's give it a whirl and a sniff. Much more of a champenoise sort of nose coming through, bit of that toastiness on the nose. And that comes through as well on the palate. It's, as I would have hoped and expected, it's nothing like the Chapel Down or the non-Kit's Coty range. Being a Blanc de Blanc, it wasn't what I was expecting at all. I wasn't expecting it to be similar, and it isn't. It's got that chalk-based soil. It's much more champagne style, but it's a little bit sweeter. It's got a little bit more creaminess in there. Again, for people who find some types of champagne a bit bitter, a bit harsh, this is very, very smooth. This is very, very crisp. This is very, very fresh. This is great aperitif wine. This is a great summer's day wine. It's tight. It's got good sort of savoury notes rather than sort of too much fruity notes. And I say that's very good too. That's coming in at £40, which is again not unacceptable at all for top end fizz. The more Chardonnay dominant English sparkling wine I taste from chalk based soils, the more green apple type characteristics are coming through. This wine is no exception. It could well be that those are a couple of English notes that Chapel Down are bringing to the fore. That if they're on non-chalk soils with a good blend of Pinots in there, and these guys use Blanc, Noir and Meunier, then perhaps it's got a lot more of that English bramble bracken thing, whereas the Chardonnay, in this case a pure Chardonnay, a lot more of that green apple characteristics with that sweet brioche, yet with a savoury creaminess to complement it. I think it's a very nice wine. I think for £40, compared to what you'd pay for an equivalent in Champagne, I think you'd be paying at least £20 more for something of that equivalent quality, which means it comes with a strong recommendation. I'm not gonna bother scoring all the sort of 8-10 different things that we've tried at Chapel Down, other than to say, you know, everything was well in our sort of 7, 8, 9, some of them pushing a 10 sort of range of WinedUp scoring, as in would we buy it again? I've bought quite a lot of them again, and several times would be recommended to people. I've recommended it to people. Those people have drunk it. Those people have really, really enjoyed it. It's a very nice place to visit, very nice restaurant, very nice shop, very nice people, very good tour, and most importantly, very, very good product. I look forward to getting my hands on the gin and the vodka, though my mum assures me that she's having first dibs on the gin. And it's absolutely well worth the visit if you're ever in Kent. I've been really impressed with the people. They're very lovely, very understated, but very, very ambitious, and seriously trying to push the boundaries of what is achievable in Kent and in England in general. You know, 1 in 5 bottles sold of English wine is Chapel Down. I can only see that continuing with the quality of winemaking and the scale of the ambition that these guys are showing. And it's really very impressive. And if you get the chance to check them out, available in M&S, Waitrose, other places, we'll link that up below. And if you ever find yourself down there, they're absolutely open for business, and it's a lovely place either just to pop into on your way past or go for an organised tour. Cheers.